I can still picture that moment with perfect clarity. I was standing in our Manhattan showroom, arranging the newest luxury watch collection we'd just received, the one I'd spent 6 months negotiating exclusive regional rights for. The spring. Sunlight filtered through the glass storefront, catching on the diamonds of our centerpiece timepiece, when Jordan Wallace, who'd been appointed CEO just 3 weeks earlier, walked in with security. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. He didn't acknowledge the record sales numbers from the previous quarter displayed proudly on the wall behind me, numbers I had personally driven. He didn't mention the industry award ceremony we'd attended just last weekend, where I'd accepted the Sales Director of the Year on behalf of Monarch Luxury Group. He just glanced at his watch, ironically, one I'd helped him select as a gift, for his father Owen, the company founder, and said, "Effie, we're restructuring the sales department. Today is your last day. 8 years of my life. 8 years of building client relationships, developing our sales strategy, training every single representative who now occupied our 5 showrooms across the East Coast. All dismissed with a 15-second speech delivered with less emotion than a weather report." The security guard, Marco, who'd always greeted me with a smile and coffee recommendation every morning, now stood awkwardly by Jordan's side, avoiding my eyes. I realized he was there to escort me out, as if I might steal something or cause a scene after devoting nearly a decade of my life to Monarch. "Is this a joke?" I asked, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. The showroom was empty of customers. Jordan had timed this ambush during our Tuesday morning lull, of course. "It's a business decision," Jordan replied, straightening the lapel of his custom Brioni suit, a suit he'd purchased using the employee discount I'd arranged for executive staff. "The direction of the company is changing. We're moving toward a different clientele, a different approach. Different approach." The words echoed in my head as I stood perfectly still, the $86,000 watch still in my hand. Just last month, I'd presented our new demographic expansion strategy to the board. Jordan had sat silently through my presentation, occasionally typing on his phone. The board had approved my plan unanimously. We were set to implement it next quarter. "You'll receive 2 weeks severance," Jordan continued, checking his phone as if my dismissal was merely an inconvenient calendar item to cross off. "HR has prepared your paperwork. You can collect your personal items, but we'll need your badge, keys, and company devices before you leave." The showroom suddenly felt airless, like we were in a vacuum. Outside, New York City continued its Tuesday. Yellow. Cabs honking, pedestrians rushing past, life continuing while mine fractured into before and after. I carefully placed the watch back in its velvet display case, making sure it was positioned at the perfect angle to catch the light. Old habits. "My team?" I asked, thinking of Laurel, Dina, and the others I'd personally recruited and mentored. "Will remain," Jordan said. "Camilla Porter is taking over as Director of Sales, effective immediately. Camilla Porter, our newest hire from our competitor across town. 3 months with Monarch, and now she was taking my position, my team, my strategies, my client relationships." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. "I see," I said. And I truly did see, perhaps for the first time, what had been happening since Owen Wallace had announced his retirement and handed the company to his son. I could have argued. I could have reminded Jordan that I had doubled our sales in the past 18 months when our competitors were struggling through the economic downturn. I could have pointed out that our client retention rate had risen from 68% to 94% under my leadership. I could have mentioned the 3 acquisition offers I'd personally fielded from larger luxury groups, all because of the sales infrastructure I'd built. Instead, I smiled. Not a forced corporate smile meant to mask hurt feelings, but a genuine one, the kind that comes with sudden, perfect clarity. "Of course," I said, removing my company badge from around my neck. I wish you luck with the restructuring. Jordan's expression flickered. Confusion, perhaps even disappointment. Had he expected tears? Pleading? A scene that would justify the security escort? I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I walked to my office, a corner space I'd earned after bringing in the Callaway account 3 years ago. The glass walls offered no privacy as I took my personal photos from the desk, a small potted succulent that Laurel had given me for my birthday, and a leather portfolio gifted by a grateful client. Everything else, the sales reports, strategy documents, client files, all belonged to Monarch now. As I packed, I could see my team watching from their workstations. Dina was openly crying. Kent, my senior sales associate, stood with his arms crossed, face set in barely contained fury. Clive was on the phone, speaking rapidly while staring at me through the glass. I gave them a small nod as Marco waited by my door. The last item I collected was a small crystal paperweight, a gift from Owen Wallace himself after my first year when I'd exceeded my targets by 43%. To the woman who can sell sand in a desert, the attached note had read. I hesitated, then placed it in my bag. It was, after all, a personal gift. As Marco walked me to the elevator, the floor was silent. Not the busy, energetic hum of a luxury sales team preparing for the day, but the heavy silence of shock and disbelief. I kept my head high, my walk measured. The elevator doors opened. I'm sorry, Effie, Marco whispered as I stepped inside. This isn't right. Thank you, Marco, I replied. How's your daughter doing in college? He looked startled, then gave a sad smile. Made Dean's List this semester? I'm glad to hear it, I said as the doors began to close. Tell her congratulations from me. The last thing I saw before the brushed steel doors met was Jordan watching. From the hallway, his expression unreadable. In the quiet descent to the lobby, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Owen Wallace. So the founder hadn't known about his son's plans. Interesting. I didn't return the calls. As I walked through the marble-floored lobby, past the security desk where I'd greeted the night guards by name for 8 years, past the coffee cart where Miguel always prepared my latte before I even ordered it, reality began to sink in. I was unemployed. 8 years of building something from near nothing to industry leading, gone in a 15-second speech. Outside, spring in New York felt obscenely cheerful. I stood on the sidewalk, designer handbag containing the sparse remnants of my career at Monarch hanging from my shoulder, and took a deep breath of city air. For the first time in 8 years, I didn't immediately check my sales reports upon leaving the building. The habitual reach for my phone to review the morning numbers felt like a phantom limb. What now? The question floated in my mind as I flagged down a taxi. The practical part of me, the part that had risen from sales associate to director in record time, was already mentally updating my resume, listing potential contacts to network with. But another part, a quieter part I rarely acknowledged, whispered, wait. Just wait. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back at the gleaming Monarch building with its iconic crown logo illuminated against the Manhattan skyline. I didn't need to. I knew its every detail, every corner, every flaw hidden beneath the polished surface. What I didn't know yet was that in exactly 72 hours, Jordan Wallace would be calling me, panic evident in his voice, begging me to return. What I couldn't possibly predict was that his hasty decision, made to consolidate his power and elevate his allies, would set in motion the most dramatic reshaping of Monarch Luxury Group since its founding. But that's getting ahead of the story. First, I needed to go home and process what had just happened, and more importantly, decide who I wanted to be on the other side of it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The taxi ride home felt surreal. 8 years at Monarch Luxury Group, gone in an instant. As we crawled through midtown traffic, my mind replayed the journey that had led me to this moment. I joined Monarch when it was barely surviving. Owen Wallace had built the company 20 years earlier with a vision of bringing European craftsmanship to American luxury retail, but by the time I arrived, that vision had blurred. Monarch operated just 2 locations then, the Manhattan flagship and a struggling boutique in Boston. Sales were stagnant. The company had lost its identity among bigger competitors. My interview with Owen had been unconventional. Instead of the standard questions about my experience selling for Barnett & Reed, a mid-tier competitor, he'd walked me through the showroom and asked what I would change. Everything, I'd replied honestly. Your displays emphasize quantity over quality. Your lighting doesn't showcase the craftsmanship. Your sales team is approaching customers with rehearsed pitches instead of building relationships. I expected to be thanked for my time and shown the door. Instead, Owen had smiled, the kind of smile that transformed his serious face into something boyish and excited. Finally, he'd said. Someone who sees it. He hired me that day as a senior sales consultant. 6 months later, I was managing the Manhattan showroom. By the end of my second year, I was director of sales for both locations. That first year had been brutal. I completely redesigned our approach, focusing on the stories behind each timepiece. I trained the team to become experts, not just salespeople. We hosted exclusive events for select clients, creating experiences around the products instead of just selling them. The taxi slowed near Central Park, and I watched a young couple admiring the spring blooms. I remembered working through an entire spring 7 years ago, missing the cherry blossoms entirely while developing our first major campaign. The campaign that saved Monarch. We'd been down to our last financial quarter of runway when I convinced Owen to invest our remaining marketing budget in a strategy that targeted not the usual luxury market, but emerging tech entrepreneurs and finance prodigies, younger clients who had newly acquired wealth and were seeking to establish their status. These clients don't just want a luxury watch, I'd explained to a skeptical board. They want to feel they've been admitted to an exclusive club they've always admired from outside. The campaign had exceeded even my optimistic projections. Sales increased 62% in 3 months. We opened a third location in Chicago 18 months later, then Washington, D.C., then Miami. The taxi turned onto my street in the Upper West Side. The neighborhood was quieter than the commercial bustle of Fifth Avenue where Monarch's flagship gleamed. My apartment building was pre-war, elegant but not flashy, much like the personal style I'd cultivated for building client trust. Inside my apartment, I kicked off the Louboutins I'd worn to work every day for the past 3 years and poured myself a glass of the Bordeaux I'd been saving for a special occasion. Getting fired seemed to qualify. As I sank into my sofa, the reality of the day crashed over me. My phone buzzed again. Owen Wallace, trying for the 4th time. I silenced it. On my coffee table sat the industry award I'd received just days ago. Sales Director of the Year. The ceremony had been a triumph, with Owen beaming proudly as I accepted it. Jordan had been there too, standing at the back of the room, expression unreadable. Jordan. The founder's son had always been on the periphery of Monarch, occasionally dropping by the office between extended vacations and half-hearted ventures of his own. When Owen announced his retirement 3 months ago, the appointment of Jordan as CEO had sent shockwaves through the company. He needs this, Owen had told me privately. A chance to prove himself. I'd nodded diplomatically, but we both knew Jordan had never shown any genuine interest in the business. What he did show interest in was Camilla Porter, whom he'd personally recruited from our competitor after meeting her at an industry cocktail party. My phone lit up with a text from Dina. The entire sales floor is in shock. Jordan won't tell us anything. What's happening? I hesitated, then replied, strategic differences. You'll be fine. Trust your training. Professional to the end, even as my insides churned with a mixture of anger and disbelief. I took another sip of wine and let my gaze drift to the wall where I'd hung the first advertisement from my rebranding campaign. The image showed a Monarch timepiece against a backdrop of Manhattan at dawn, for those who make every second count. The tagline had become our company identity. More messages flooded in. From Kent. This is Bulls. Half the team is talking about walking out. From Laurel. Camilla's already moving into your office. Jordan's giving her access to your client portfolio. My client portfolio. The relationships I'd cultivated for years. The high net worth individuals who purchased from Monarch not because of the brand name, but because they trusted my expertise. Clients who called me directly when they needed anniversary gifts or celebration purchases. My laptop sat on the desk in my home office. I should open it, start updating my resume, reach out to contacts in the industry. That's what the practical Effie would do. Instead, I found myself walking to the window, looking out at the city I'd conquered one luxury sale at a time. I thought about the Stevenson account, a finance mogul who had purchased over $2 million in timepieces in the past 3 years, all because I remembered his wife preferred vintage-inspired designs. I thought about the Anderson family, who came to me for graduation gifts, anniversary presents, milestone markers, all chosen with the personal attention I gave each selection. These weren't just sales, they were relationships, trust built over years. My phone buzzed again, this time a name I didn't expect, Michael Barrett, Owen Wallace's longtime friend and Monarch's legal counsel. The message was brief. Need to speak with you. Urgent. Call when you can. Michael had been with Monarch since its founding. He'd drawn up my employment contract, handled our expansion paperwork, negotiated our exclusive distribution agreements with European watchmakers. Why would Monarch's lawyer be contacting me hours after my termination? The practical part of my brain cautioned me not to respond. The curious part, the part that had seen an opportunity in a failing luxury brand 8 years ago, reached for the phone. Michael, this is unexpected, I said when he answered. His voice was low, tense. Effie, did you ever read your employment contract? The full contract, including the appendices Owen added when you became director? Of course, I replied automatically. Though in truth, I'd skimmed the legal sections, focusing on compensation terms and performance bonuses. I don't think you did, Michael said, and something in his tone made me sit straighter. Because if you had, you'd know about the client protection clause Owen insisted on adding. Client protection clause? Section 12B, paragraph 3, Michael recited from memory. In recognition of Director Harris's unique client relationships and their value to Monarch Luxury Group, any termination of employment must include a 60-day transition period for client accounts valued at over $250,000 annually, during which Director Harris retains signatory authority for client transactions. I blinked, trying to process his words. In plain English, Michael continued, Jordan can't fire you effective immediately, not without risking our relationships with our highest value clients, not without breaching your contract. For the first time since Jordan had uttered those words in the showroom, I felt something shift inside me. Not hope exactly, but something adjacent to it. Why are you telling me this, Michael? There was a pause before he answered. Because Owen doesn't know what his son did today, and by the time he finds out, it might be too late to fix. After hanging up with Michael, I sat motionless in my living room, the implications of his words slowly crystallizing in my mind. I had legal grounds to challenge my termination. I had leverage. But did I want to use it? My phone continued to light up with messages from team members, industry colleagues who'd somehow already heard the news, and even a few clients who had my personal number. I silenced them all. I needed clarity before I responded to anyone. Pulled out my laptop and searched through my files for the employment contract Michael had mentioned. There it was. A 24-page document I'd signed 3 years ago when I officially became director of sales. I scrolled to section 12B and read the clause for myself. Michael hadn't exaggerated. The language was clear. I was entitled to a 60-day transition period for our high-value client accounts, with full signatory authority during that time. Jordan had breached my contract with his immediate termination. Thought lawyer and Michael would see this as a straightforward case of contract enforcement. The businessman in Owen would recognize it as protection for valuable client relationships. But for me, the question was more complex. What did I want? I could march back into Monarch tomorrow morning, contract in hand, and demand reinstatement. For the transition period, I could watch Jordan squirm as he was forced to walk back his public dismissal of me. I could savor the momentary victory. But at what cost? A toxic work environment for 60 days? Awkward client meetings where everyone knew I was on my way out? A damaged professional reputation in an industry where relationships were everything? No. If there was one thing I'd learned in 8 years of luxury sales, it was that desperation never closed a deal. Confidence did. Patience did. Strategy did. I closed my laptop without sending a single email. Instead, I poured another glass of wine, drew a bath, and allowed myself one evening to process everything that had happened. Tomorrow would be soon enough to decide my next move. The following morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window. For the first time in 8 years, I didn't immediately check my sales reports or respond to overnight client emails from international time zones. I made coffee, real coffee that I savored instead of gulping down between calls. I took a long shower, dressed in casual clothes, and walked to the bakery around the corner, something I'd never had time to do on a weekday before. By 10 a.m., my phone had accumulated 37 missed calls and 56 text messages. I scrolled through them while sitting on a park bench, the spring sun warm on my face. Several were from Owen Wallace, his messages growing increasingly concerned. "Effie, please call me. We need to talk about what happened. This isn't what I wanted." Jordan had called twice, leaving terse voicemails. "We should discuss your exit package. Call me back to arrange the transfer of your client files." Dina had sent a group photo of the sales team at their regular morning meeting, all wearing black as if in mourning. Kent had texted that 3 clients had already called asking specifically for me. Clive reported that the Daniels account, worth over $800,000 annually, had canceled their appointment upon learning I wouldn't be there. The most interesting message came from Camilla Porter herself. "I think we should talk." This transition wasn't my idea. I read it twice, intrigued by the hint of distance she was placing between herself and Jordan's decision. Smart move on her part. What struck me most as I scrolled through the messages was my own emotional response, or, rather, the lack of one. Yesterday I'd been in shock. Today I felt strangely calm, almost detached. The anger I expected to feel had transformed into something more useful: clarity. I decided to respond to exactly one message, Michael's, asking if I'd had time to review the contract language he'd mentioned. "I've reviewed it," I wrote. "Thank you for bringing it to my attention. I'm considering my options and will be in touch." Then I silenced my phone again and spent the day doing something I hadn't done in years. Nothing. I walked through the Metropolitan Museum of Art, lingering in the antiquities section where timepieces from centuries past were displayed behind glass. I ate lunch at a small cafe where no one knew me as Effie from Monarch. I bought a novel from a bookstore and read the first 3 chapters on a park bench. By evening, I felt more like myself than I had in years. Not Effie Harris, sales director, but just Effie. The woman who had once been passionate about art history before discovering her talent for luxury sales. The woman who could spend an hour admiring the craftsmanship of a single watch movement. The woman who had been gradually disappearing beneath sales targets and client meetings. When I finally returned to my apartment and checked my messages again, one stood out from the dozens that had accumulated throughout the day. It was from Teresa Daniels, wife of Richard Daniels, our $800,000 annual client. Effie, Richard is furious about your departure from Monarch. He's canceled all future purchases with them. He asked me to reach out personally. We'd like to meet with you whenever you're ready. This isn't about watches anymore. It's about loyalty. I read the message 3 times, my mind working through the implications. The Daniels weren't just any clients. They were influencers in their social circle, the kind of people whose purchasing decisions were watched and emulated by others. If they were publicly withdrawing their business from Monarch. For the first time since Jordan had fired me, I smiled. Not the polite, professional smile I'd given him in the showroom, but a genuine one that reached my eyes. I didn't respond to Teresa immediately. Instead, I opened my laptop and created 2 documents, a spreadsheet listing my top 20 client relationships with annual purchase values, and a simple, elegant letter. The letter wasn't angry or accusatory. It didn't mention my firing or Jordan Wallace. It simply stated, "Dear valued client, after 8 wonderful years, I am writing to inform you that I am no longer with Monarch Luxury Group. It has been my sincere pleasure to assist you with your timepiece selections over the years, and I am deeply grateful for the trust you've placed in me. While I consider my next professional chapter, I would be delighted to remain in contact. My personal email is below should you wish to reach me for any reason. With warmest regards and appreciation, Effie Harris." I didn't send it, not yet, but I had it ready. That night, I slept better than I had in years, without the constant ping of client messages or the weight of sales projections hanging over me. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my terms, not as a desperate ex-employee, but as a professional who knew her value. On the morning of the 2nd day after my termination, I finally answered a call from Owen Wallace. "Effie," he said, immediately, his voice heavy with regret. "I've just returned from my medical appointments to complete chaos. What has happened?" "I think you know what happened, Owen," I replied, keeping my voice even. "Your son fired me without cause or notice." There was a long pause before he spoke again. "I didn't authorize this. I was away for scheduled medical tests. Jordan was supposed to maintain operations, not make executive decisions about key personnel. Nevertheless, he did." "Michael told me about the contract clause," Owen continued. "You're entitled to—" "I know what I'm entitled to," I interrupted gently. "The question is what I want." Another pause. "And what do you want, Effie?" I took a deep breath. "Right now, I want to take a few days to consider my options, all of them, without pressure or panic from Monarch." "Of course," Owen said quickly. "Take all the time you need. But Effie, you should know that the Daniels account isn't the only one we've lost. Henderson called this morning. So did the Whitman Group. They're all asking for you specifically." Closed my eyes briefly, absorbing this information without visible reaction, though Owen couldn't see me through the phone. "I'm not surprised," I said finally. "These relationships were built on trust and personal attention. They can't be transferred, like inventory." "I know that," Owen replied, frustration evident in his voice. "Jordan is learning that lesson rather painfully right now." I said nothing, waiting. "I'd like to meet with you," he continued. "Not here at the office, somewhere neutral, to discuss how we move forward." "I'll think about it," I said, then added, "Goodbye, Owen," and ended the call before he could respond. I set my phone down on the kitchen counter and gazed out at the Manhattan skyline. The next move was mine, and for the first time since joining Monarch Luxury Group, I had the luxury of time to make it carefully, deliberately, and entirely on my own terms. By the afternoon of the 2nd day after my termination, I'd established a temporary office at my dining room table. 3 notebooks lay open before me, one for client notes, one for industry contacts and opportunities, and one for thoughts about Monarch. My laptop displayed the growing list of messages from clients, each more concerned than the last. I'd begun sorting clients into categories: those with genuine personal connections who would likely follow me anywhere, those loyal to the Monarch brand regardless of who served them, and those in between who might be swayed either way, depending on how the situation unfolded. The Daniels family was clearly in the first category. So were the Whitmans and Hendersons. Together, these 3 relationships represented nearly $2.4 million in annual sales, almost 18% of Monarch's Manhattan showroom revenue. And they were just the beginning. As I worked, I thought about Jordan Wallace. I'd never disliked him before his father's retirement. He'd been a harmless presence on the periphery of the company, showing up at holiday parties, occasionally dropping by the showroom to use his discount. I'd even helped him select gifts for girlfriends over the years. He had always been polite, if somewhat detached. Certainly nothing in our prior interactions had suggested the cold dismissal he'd delivered. 2 days ago, what had changed? The obvious answer was power. Once he held it, he'd shown his true colors. But something didn't quite fit. Jordan wasn't stupid, entitled perhaps, but not lacking in basic intelligence. He must have known that firing the director of sales who had doubled company revenue would have consequences. So why do it? I picked up my phone and scrolled to a name I hadn't contacted yet. Laurel Davis, my assistant for the past 3 years, and the person who knew more about the inner workings of our office than anyone. Effie, she answered immediately, her voice hushed. Are you okay? I've been so worried. I'm fine, Laurel, I replied. Just processing everything. Can you talk? Give me a minute. I heard shuffling, a door closing. I'm in the supply closet. It's the only place without glass walls. Jordan's had Camilla shadowing me all day, trying to understand your client management system. How's that going for her? I couldn't help asking. Laurel gave a short, quiet laugh. About as well as you'd expect. You didn't exactly leave a user manual for your personalized approach to client relationships. No, I agreed. I didn't. The Stevenson meeting was a disaster this morning, Laurel continued. Mr. Stevenson took one look at Camilla and asked where you were. When she explained you were no longer with the company, he walked out, said he'd be in touch when you landed somewhere worthy of his business. I made a note next to Stevenson's name in my client notebook. Jordan must be thrilled, I said mildly. He's in full panic mode. He's been locked in his office making calls since noon. The board is meeting tomorrow morning. She paused. Effie, what happened? Why did he fire you? So suddenly? This was the question I'd been asking myself for 2 days. That's actually why I'm calling. Did you notice anything unusual in the days before it happened? Any meetings, conversations, changes in behavior? Laurel was silent for a moment, thinking. Well, Camilla was in his office a lot, but that's been happening since she arrived. Oh, there was that meeting with the Morgan Brothers representative last week? I frowned. Morgan Brothers? The investment group? Yes, Jordan met with their VP of acquisitions. Very hush-hush. I only know because I had to clear his schedule and order. Lunch. The meeting ran long, almost 4 hours. My mind raced. Morgan Brothers was known for acquiring luxury brands, streamlining their operations, often through aggressive staff reductions, and flipping them for profit. They'd approached Owen 3 years ago, and he'd flatly refused their offer. Did Owen know about this meeting? I asked. I don't think so. It was while he was at Mayo Clinic for his tests. A picture was beginning to form, still blurry around the edges but with a distinct shape. One more thing, I said. Do you remember that market expansion proposal I submitted last month? The one the board approved unanimously? Of course. The Targeted demographic extension to younger tech entrepreneurs in emerging markets. You'd been working on it for months. Has anyone mentioned it since I left? Has Jordan discussed implementation? No, Laurel said slowly. In fact, he told the team this morning that Monarch would be returning to its roots with a focus on traditional luxury clients. He specifically mentioned moving away from the newer markets you developed. The picture sharpened further. Interesting, I murmured. Effie. Laurel's voice dropped even lower. There's something else. I wasn't supposed to see it, but a document was left in the copier yesterday. It looked like a preliminary term sheet. From Morgan Brothers. My breath caught. Are you sure? Positive. Their logo was on the letterhead. I only saw the first page before Camilla snatched it up, but it mentioned something about streamlining, operations, and returning to core brand identity. Everything clicked into place with stunning clarity. Jordan wasn't just replacing me with Camilla on a whim. He was preparing Monarch for acquisition. My client relationships, my expansion strategies, my influence with the board, all would have presented obstacles to a quick sale. So I had to go immediately and without warning before I could rally support or protection. Laurel, you've been incredibly helpful, I said. But I need you to promise me something. Don't mention this call to anyone, and don't do anything differently at work. Just watch and listen. Of course, she agreed. But Effie, what are you going to do? I looked down at my notebooks, at the meticulous records of clients and relationships I'd built over 8 years. I'm going to take some time to think, I said. And then I'm going to make a decision that's right for me. Not for Monarch, not for Jordan, not for Owen. For me. After we hung up, I stood and walked to my window, watching the rhythm of the city below. People rushing to meetings, hailing cabs, living their lives oblivious to the corporate drama unfolding in luxury showrooms and boardrooms. For 8 years, I'd given everything to Monarch. Holidays, weekends, relationships, all sacrificed for the company's growth. I'd believed I was building something lasting, something valuable. And perhaps I had been, just not in the way I thought. I hadn't built Monarch's success. I'd built my own reputation, my own relationships, my own expertise. The company had merely been the vessel for my talents, and vessels could be changed. That evening, I did something I hadn't done since joining Monarch. I called my younger sister. Effie? Camilla answered, surprised. It's been forever. Is everything okay? Actually, no, I admitted. I lost my job. What? But you're their star. The Golden Goose? What happened? I gave her the condensed version, feeling a strange relief in speaking the words aloud to someone completely removed from the luxury watch industry. That's terrible, she said when I finished. But also, maybe it's not. What do you mean? Effie, I've seen you twice in the past 3 years. Both times you were exhausted, checking your phone constantly, talking about client emergencies. When was the last time you took a real vacation, or went on a date, or did anything just because it made you happy? Her questions hit me with unexpected force. When was the last time? I don't know, I admitted quietly. Maybe this is an opportunity, she suggested, to figure out what you actually want, not what Monarch wants from you. After we hung up, I poured a glass of wine and returned to my dining room table. Looking at my notebooks with fresh eyes, I realized I'd been approaching this all wrong. I'd been thinking like a sales director trying to salvage her position or leverage her assets. I needed to think like Effie Harris, a woman at a crossroads. What did I truly want? To return to Monarch and the grueling schedule that came with it? To join a competitor and essentially recreate my current life with a different logo? To start something new entirely? For the first time, I allowed myself to consider options beyond the luxury watch industry. I'd always loved art history before, stumbling into sales. I'd once dreamed of curating museum collections or working in art restoration. The thought sent an unexpected thrill through me. a reminder of passion long buried under commission structures and sales targets. But I couldn't deny that I was exceptionally good at what I did. My client relationships were genuine. I took pride in matching people with timepieces that would become family heirlooms, marking significant moments in their lives. That connection wasn't something I was ready to abandon entirely. As night fell over Manhattan, I made a decision. I wouldn't react immediately to Jordan's firing or Owen's attempts at reconciliation. I would take the time this unexpected freedom had given me to carefully consider not just my next move, but my next several moves, like a chess player thinking 5 steps ahead. Jordan Wallace had made the first move, impulsive and poorly calculated. Now it was my turn, and I intended to make it count. I closed my notebooks and went to bed, sleeping peacefully for the 3rd night in a row, something that would have been impossible during my tenure at Monarch. In the morning, the real work would begin. On the morning of the 3rd day after my termination, I woke to a text from Michael Barrett. Owen called emergency board meeting. 8 a.m., things escalating quickly. I made coffee and checked my email. 3 more high-value clients had written overnight, all expressing dismay at my departure and requesting my new contact information. I added them to my growing list but didn't respond yet. Timing would be everything. At 9:17 a.m., Laurel texted, "Board meeting over. Jordan looks shaken. Owen taking meetings in main conference room all day." I smiled slightly. The first tremors were being felt. At 9:45 a.m., my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost declined it, but something made me answer. Effie Harris speaking. "Ms. Harris, this is Victor Morgan of Morgan Brothers Investment Group." My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice neutral. "Mr. Morgan, this is unexpected." "I imagine it is," he replied, his voice carrying the practiced smoothness of someone accustomed to high-stakes negotiations. "I hope I'm not interrupting your morning." "Not at all. How can I help you?" "I believe we may be able to help each other," he said. "I understand you're no longer with Monarch Luxury Group." News travels fast in this industry. "It does when key players make unexpected moves," he agreed, "particularly when those players are responsible for doubling company revenue in challenging market conditions." I said nothing, waiting. "Ms. Harris, I'll be direct. Morgan Brothers has been interested in Monarch for some time. We're currently in preliminary discussions with Jordan Wallace about a potential acquisition." "How interesting," I said mildly, though my mind was racing. "And does Owen Wallace know about these discussions?" A slight pause. "My understanding is that Mr. Wallace Sr. is stepping back from operations due to health concerns." Translation? Jordan was moving forward without his father's knowledge or approval. "I see," I said. "And how exactly do you think we might help each other, Mr. Morgan?" "We've done our due diligence on Monarch," Victor continued. "You've been the driving force behind their growth for years. The client relationships, the market expansion, the brand repositioning, that was all you. Jordan Wallace is, well, let's just say we recognize the difference between inherited position and earned expertise." "Flattering, but still doesn't answer my question." He chuckled. "Direct. I appreciate that. Here's my proposal. Morgan Brothers would like to offer you a position post-acquisition, Director of Client Relations for our entire luxury portfolio. Full autonomy, substantial equity package, and a salary significantly higher than what Monarch was paying you." I raised an eyebrow, though he couldn't see it. The offer was tempting. Better title, more money, broader responsibilities. But something felt off. That's a generous offer, especially for someone who's been unemployed for less than 72 hours, I said carefully. But it raises an obvious question. If you value my contribution to Monarch so highly, why approach me after Jordan fired me? Why not before? Another pause, longer this time. Let's just say the timing has proven convenient for all parties. And there it was. The missing piece snapped into place with perfect clarity. "I see," I said. my voice cooling several degrees. Jordan didn't fire me impulsively, did he? This was coordinated. You wanted my client relationships but not my potential opposition to the acquisition, so you had Jordan remove me from the equation, planning to rehire me after the deal closed. Once. I had no power to influence the terms or protect the company. Ms. Harris, business acquisitions are complex. Yes, they are, I interrupted. But some things are actually quite simple, like integrity and loyalty, and the fact that client relationships in luxury retail are built on trust, not corporate. Maneuvering. Perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot, Victor said, his smoothness slightly strained now. Why don't we meet in person to discuss? I don't think that will be necessary, I replied, but I appreciate the clarity your call has provided. Good day, Mr. Morgan. I ended the call and sat back in my chair, a strange calm settling over me. The full picture was now crystal clear. Jordan hadn't acted alone. He'd been working with Morgan Brothers all along, setting up a deal that would likely earn him a handsome payout while transferring control of his father's legacy to corporate raiders known for stripping companies down to their most profitable elements. My firing wasn't personal. It was tactical. They needed me out of the way to execute their plan, then back on board to maintain the client relationships once the deal was done. They had underestimated me spectacularly. I opened my laptop and began drafting 3 emails. The first was to Michael Barrett. Michael, I've just received a very interesting call from Victor Morgan of Morgan Brothers Investment Group, offering me a position post-acquisition of Monarch. It appears Jordan's decision to terminate me was coordinated with their acquisition strategy. I thought Owen might find this information relevant to today's meetings. I'm also formally notifying you that I intend to exercise my rights under Section 12B of my employment contract, effective immediately. Please prepare the necessary documentation to reinstate my signatory authority for client accounts as specified in the contract. Best regards, Effie Harris. The second email was to Owen Wallace. Owen, I hope your medical tests went well. I'm reaching out because I've received concerning information regarding Morgan Brothers' interest in Monarch, specifically their coordination with Jordan regarding my termination. I've instructed Michael to brief you on the details. I'm also exercising my contractual right to manage client transitions, per Section 12B of my employment agreement. I'm open to meeting tomorrow to discuss Monarch's future and my role in it, should you wish to do so. Regards, Effie. The third email, I drafted but didn't send. It was addressed to my top 20 clients, informing them of my contract provision and my return to manage their accounts during a transition period. That email was my nuclear option, one I hoped I wouldn't need to, but had ready nonetheless. I sent the first 2 emails, then made another cup of coffee. By the time I returned to my laptop, Michael had already responded, Effie, this information is extremely troubling but not entirely surprising. I've been concerned about Jordan's activities since Owen stepped back for medical leave. I've already notified HR about your contract provision and am preparing the formal documentation. Given these new developments with Morgan Brothers, I believe Owen will want to expedite your return. I'll call you later today after I've spoken with him. Michael. I closed my laptop and walked to the window, gazing out at the city. For 8 years, I'd been focused on building Monarch's success, believing I was securing my own future in the process. Now I realized that the true power had never been in my title or office, but in the relationships I'd built and the trust I'd earned. My phone buzzed with a text from Laurel. Something big happening. Owen just called Jordan and Camilla into his office, closed the blinds. Security has been called to the building. I set my phone down without replying. The wheels were in motion now. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. Owen Wallace. Effie, he said when I answered, his voice grave. We need to talk. How soon can you come to the office? I can be there in an hour, I replied. Good. Use the executive entrance. Michael will meet you. Owen, I said before he could hang up. Just to be clear, am I coming as a terminated employee exercising contract rights? Or are we discussing something else entirely? There was a pause, then a heavy sigh. You're coming as the person who might save this company from my son's catastrophic mistake. We're not just discussing your client transition period, Effie. We're discussing Monarch's future leadership. A rush of adrenaline coursed through me. This was more than I'd anticipated. I'll be there in an hour, I confirmed, and ended the call. Dressed carefully, not in my usual sales director attire, but in a power suit I reserved for major client presentations. As I fastened my mother's vintage Cartier watch around my wrist, the only luxury timepiece I owned before joining Monarch, I felt a sense of coming full circle. 3 days ago, Jordan Wallace had fired me, believing he was clearing an obstacle from his path. He couldn't have known that in doing so, he had triggered a sequence of events that would lead not only to his own downfall, but to my greatest opportunity. Sometimes, being underestimated is the greatest advantage of all. As my taxi approached the Monarch building, I noticed something unusual. A black SUV with tinted windows idling near the executive entrance, driver at the ready. Security personnel stood at attention nearby, more visible than normal. Whatever was happening inside had escalated beyond a simple personnel dispute. Michael Barrett was waiting for me at the private entrance as promised, his normally composed demeanor showing cracks of tension. Effie, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for coming so quickly. Your message made it sound urgent, I replied, shaking his hand firmly. He guided me toward the executive elevator, the one I rarely use despite my director status, preferring to walk the sales floor and engage with my team. The situation has deteriorated rapidly since this morning, he explained as the elevator doors closed. After your email about Morgan Brothers, Owen made some calls. It appears Jordan has been in talks with them for nearly 2 months, completely unauthorized. That doesn't surprise me, I said, but I imagine Owen took it poorly. Michael's expression tightened. That would be an understatement. When confronted, Jordan admitted he'd been promised a substantial payout and a 3-year consulting contract if the acquisition went through. And Camilla was aware of the plan. Morgan Brothers had already offered her a position managing what would remain of the sales team after their planned downsizing. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, and immediately I sensed the different atmosphere. The normal bustle of assistants and executives was gone, replaced by an eerie quiet. Several office doors were closed, unusual in a space designed with glass walls for transparency. Where is everyone? I asked. Owen sent most of the executive team home after the confrontation with Jordan. He wanted to minimize witnesses and speculation. Michael lowered his voice. There was shouting. Things were said that can't be unsaid. He led me toward Owen's corner office, but as we approached, I noticed the lights were off. We're meeting in the boardroom, Michael clarified, turning left down another hallway. When we entered the large conference room, I was surprised to find only Owen sitting at the far end of the table that normally seated 20 board members. He looked older than when I'd last seen him a week ago, his shoulders slightly hunched, his normally immaculate silver hair slightly disheveled. Effie, he said, rising to greet me. Thank you for coming. I took the seat he indicated to his right, the position typically reserved for the most senior executive present. Michael sat across from me. I take it Jordan won't be joining us, I observed. Owen's expression hardened. Jordan has been suspended from all company activities, effective immediately. His access to our systems, buildings, and accounts has been revoked. I raised an eyebrow. That's a significant step. Conspiring to sell your father's company to corporate raiders known for dismantling legacy brands deserves a significant response, Owen replied, his voice tight with controlled anger, especially when it involves firing the person most responsible for the company's current success as part of the scheme. He pushed a folder across the table toward me. Your reinstatement paperwork, as required by your contract. Michael has prepared everything. I opened the folder but didn't immediately sign the documents inside. Before we proceed, I'd like to understand exactly what you're proposing, Owen. Michael mentioned something about discussing Monarch's future leadership. Owen exchanged a glance with Michael, then nodded. I've spent the past 3 hours considering Monarch's options. Morgan Brothers has made it clear they won't back down easily. They've already approached 3 of our board members with incentives to support the acquisition. They move quickly, I noted. Vultures usually do, Owen replied grimly. I built this company to be a legacy, not to be stripped for parts by investment bankers. But after today, I'm forced to acknowledge that my succession plan was catastrophically flawed. I didn't contradict him. I need someone I can trust, he continued. Someone who understands luxury retail, who's proven they can grow this business, who has the respect of our team and our clients. He met my gaze directly. I'm offering you the position of Chief Executive Officer of Monarch Luxury Group. Though I'd suspected this might be coming after Owen's phone call, hearing the words spoken aloud still sent a jolt through me. CEO, not just reinstatement to my former position, but elevation to the highest role in the company. That's a significant promotion, I said carefully. What about your retirement? Your health concerns? My health is stable for now, Owen said. The tests confirmed what my doctors suspected. I need to reduce stress and delegate more, but I'm not at death's door. I'll remain as chairman of the board, focusing on our European partnerships and long-term strategy, while you handle day-to-day operations and growth. I considered his words carefully. The offer was extraordinary. Everything I'd worked toward for years, presented on a silver platter in the most unexpected circumstances. But I wasn't going to repeat Jordan's mistake of acting impulsively from a position of temporary power. And the board? I asked. Will they support this decision, particularly with Morgan Brothers pressuring them? Owen smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. I still control 51% of Monarch's voting shares. The board can advise, but they can't block this appointment. And Jordan? I pressed. What happens with him? Owen's smile faded. He'll retain his shares as my son, but he'll have no operational role in the company. His actions have consequences. I nodded slowly, weighing my next words carefully. I appreciate your confidence in me, Owen. But before I accept, I need to be clear about my conditions. If he was surprised by my response, he didn't show it. I'm listening. First, I want complete autonomy to reshape the executive team as needed. No sacred cows, no protected positions. Agreed, Owen said without hesitation. Second, I want equity in the company. 5% vested immediately, with an additional 5% vesting over 3 years. Michael's eyebrows shot up, but Owen simply nodded. We can make that work. Third, I want to establish an employee ownership program, starting with the sales team. The people who build this company should share in its success. Owen considered this longer. That's more complex, but not unreasonable. Michael can draft something for board approval. I took a deep breath. Finally, I want your word, your personal guarantee that you won't undermine my decisions or second-guess my strategy, even if it differs from your vision for Monarch. If I'm going to lead this company, I need to truly lead it. The room fell silent as Owen studied me, his expression unreadable. After what felt like minutes but was likely only seconds, he extended his hand across the table. You have my word, he said firmly. Monarch is yours to lead. I looked at his outstretched hand, thinking of all that had transpired in the past 3 days. The humiliation of being fired, the shock of discovering the conspiracy between Jordan and Morgan Brothers, the unexpected opportunity now before me. I thought of my sister's questions about my life beyond work, about vacations not taken and relationships not pursued. I thought of the clients who had immediately withdrawn their business upon learning of my departure, demonstrating loyalty I hadn't fully appreciated until now. Most of all, I thought about power. Not just the formal authority of a title, but the true power that comes from knowing your worth and refusing to accept anything less. 3 days ago, Jordan Wallace had looked at me like I was expendable. Today, his father was offering me control of the entire company. I reached across the table and shook Owen's hand. Then we have a deal. Michael visibly relaxed, relief washing over his features. I'll announce your appointment to the executive team immediately, Owen said, and to the board this evening. No, I said, surprising both men. Not yet. Owen frowned. Why wait? We need to stabilize the company, reassure our team, and we will, I assured him. But Morgan Brothers is still circling, and 3 board members are already compromised. Right now, they believe they've successfully removed me as an obstacle. That's an advantage I'd like to maintain for at least 24 hours. Understanding dawned on Owen's face. You want to counter their move before they know you're back? Exactly, I said, a plan already forming in my mind. Here's what we're going to do. As I outlined my strategy for thwarting Morgan Brothers and securing Monarch's independence, I felt a sense of clarity and purpose I hadn't experienced in years. The power I now held wasn't just in the CEO title I would soon assume, but in the relationships I'd built, the expertise I'd developed, and the loyalty I'd earned, all of which Jordan and Morgan Brothers had fatally underestimated. They had seen me as merely a sales director, a disposable cog in their acquisition machinery. They were about to discover how wrong they had been. Sometimes the person you dismiss without a second thought becomes the architect of your undoing. Jordan Wallace was about to learn that lesson the hard way. News travels quickly in luxury retail circles. By the time I left Monarch's headquarters that afternoon, exiting through a service entrance to maintain the illusion of my continued separation from the company, the industry grapevine was already buzzing with rumors. As I settled into a cafe several blocks away, my phone vibrated constantly with messages from colleagues, competitors, and clients. I responded selectively, careful not to reveal my new arrangement with Owen. For the next 24 hours, strategic ambiguity would be our greatest asset. A text from Laurel caught my attention. Something huge happening. Jordan escorted out by security. Camilla in tears in the bathroom. Executive floor on lockdown. What's going on? I replied simply, interesting developments. Keep watching. Trust me. At 3:15 p.m., Kent called. I answered, curious about what was happening on the sales floor. Effie, he said immediately, his voice hushed but excited. You won't believe what's happening here. Total chaos. Tell me, I said, sipping my cappuccino. Jordan was just marched out by security. Didn't even get to pack his things. Rumor is he tried to access the client database after being explicitly told not to. Kent paused, then added, and get this, Camilla's been locked out of your office. It came up and changed the passcodes right in front of everyone. That sounds dramatic, I commented neutrally. It's insane. Half the team thinks the company is imploding, the other half is speculating about a hostile takeover. His voice dropped further. There's also a rumor that the Stevenson account, Henderson Group, and at least 4 other major clients all threatened to pull their business this morning. Collectively, they represent something like 30% of our annual revenue. I smiled slightly. The client exodus had begun even faster than I'd anticipated. How strange, I said mildly. Effie, Kent said, frustration evident in his tone. You know, something. This can't be coincidence. Jordan fires you. 3 days later, he's escorted out while our biggest clients are threatening to walk. What's really going on? Kent, I appreciate your loyalty these past years, I said carefully. Right. Now, the best thing you can do is keep the sales team calm and focused. Tell them to maintain normal operations and refer any unusual client questions to Michael Barrett's office. So there is a plan, he pressed. There's always a plan, I replied. Trust the process. After ending the call, I checked my watch. 4 more hours until Owen's emergency board meeting, where he would inform them of Jordan's suspension and the Morgan brothers' situation, but not yet of my new position. That revelation would come tomorrow, after we'd secured our position against the acquisition attempt. I pulled out my laptop and opened a secured document Michael had sent. A complete list of Monarch's board members with notes on their loyalties, financial situations, and voting history. We knew 3 had already been approached by Morgan brothers, but we needed to ensure the others remained firmly on our side. I began drafting personalized messages to each board member from my personal email address, ostensibly reaching out, as Monarch's former sales director concerned about client reactions to my departure, but actually laying groundwork for tomorrow's announcement. To Bernard Franklin, our longest-serving board member who had been with Owen since the beginning. Bernard, I'm reaching out personally given our long history of collaboration. While my departure from Monarch was unexpected, my concern for the company's legacy and client relationships remains. I've received numerous calls from concerned clients, and I believe maintaining stability is paramount right now. To Diane Mercer, who had initially advocated for my promotion to sales director years ago. Diane, I valued your mentorship during my years at Monarch and hope I can speak candidly. Several significant clients have reached out expressing concern about recent changes. While I'm no longer with the company, I believe there may be ways to mitigate potential disruption. Each message was carefully calibrated to the individual's priorities and concerns, subtly reinforcing the value I had brought to Monarch without explicitly mentioning my impending return or the Morgan brothers' situation. As I worked, my phone rang again, a number I recognized as Victor Morgan's. I answered, curious about his next move. Ms. Harris, he began without preamble, we should talk again. The situation at Monarch has evolved since our conversation this morning. Has it? I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Yes, he said, a new edge in his voice. It appears Owen Wallace has returned in a more active capacity than anticipated. Our discussions with Jordan have been temporarily paused. How unfortunate for you. Victor's laugh held no humor. This is merely a delay, Ms. Harris. Owen is 68 years old with health concerns. He cannot run Monarch indefinitely, and Jordan has made his intentions clear. The outcome is inevitable. Nothing in business is inevitable, Mr. Morgan, I replied. That's what makes it interesting. True, he conceded, which is why I'd like to improve our offer to you. Whatever Owen has promised to bring you back, and I suspect he's already reached out, we can exceed it, substantially. So Morgan brothers had already deduced that Owen would try to bring me back. They were well informed, if not entirely accurate. What makes you think Owen has made me an offer? I asked. Because it's the obvious counter-move, Victor said dismissively. You control too many client relationships to leave in play. But whatever temporary role he's offering, it can't compare to what we're prepared to provide. True leadership across our entire luxury portfolio, with resources and growth potential. Monarch can't match as a standalone company. I let a moment of silence stretch, as if considering his words. I appreciate your candor, Mr. Morgan, I finally said. But I learned something valuable 3 days ago when Jordan fired me. The importance of working with people of integrity. I'll consider your offer and be in touch. Before he could respond, I ended the call, smiling to myself. Let him think I was weighing my options. The uncertainty would keep Morgan brothers from making any drastic moves before tomorrow. At 4:30 p.m., another unexpected call came through. Teresa Daniels, wife of Richard Daniels, our $800,000 annual client. Effie, she said warmly when I answered. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, Teresa. It's lovely to hear from you. We've been so concerned since learning of your departure from Monarch, she continued. Richard spoke with Owen Wallace this morning. Quite forcefully, I might. He made it clear that our family's business with Monarch was contingent on your involvement. That's extremely kind, I said, genuinely touched. Your loyalty means a great deal to me. It's not just loyalty, Effie. It's recognition of value. That young woman they tried to replace you with, Camilla, she contacted Richard yesterday. Tried to schedule a lunch, offered a private showing of pieces that just arrived from Geneva. As if we care about the watches themselves more than the relationship and expertise you provide. I smiled, imagining Camilla's approach. She wasn't wrong to reach out quickly, but she had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of high-net-worth client relationships. They weren't transactional. They were built on trust, discretion, and genuine connection. Teresa, I may have some news for you soon, I said. But for now, I'd ask for your patience for just one more day. Intriguing, she replied, curiosity evident in her voice. Richard will be pleased to hear there are developments. We've actually put our anniversary timepiece purchase on hold. It would have been our largest acquisition yet. Nearly $2 million. My eyebrows raised. The Daniels had been considering their most significant purchase to date, and Jordan's actions had placed it in jeopardy, another consequence he hadn't anticipated. After finishing my call with Teresa, I checked my email to find responses already coming in from board members, cautious, curious, concerned. The seeds had been planted. At 5:45 p.m., Michael texted, "Board meeting in 15. Key documents prepared per your strategy. We'll update afterward." I sent a quick acknowledgement, then closed my laptop. The pieces were in motion. By this time tomorrow, Monarch would have a new CEO, and Morgan Brothers would be facing a very different landscape than they had anticipated. My phone buzzed one final time that evening, a message from an unknown number. "This isn't over. You have no idea what you're up against." J. Jordan Wallace making threats from the sidelines. 3 days ago, such a message might have unsettled me. Now it merely confirmed what I already knew. Jordan had badly miscalculated, not just by firing me, but by underestimating what would happen next. I didn't bother responding. Tomorrow would speak for itself. The following morning, day 4 since my termination, I woke early, my mind already racing with the day's critical tasks. Today was the day everything would change officially, though the transformation had been underway since Jordan's ill-fated decision to fire me. I was preparing my morning coffee when my doorbell rang unexpectedly. It was just past 7 a.m., too early for casual visitors. Through the peephole, I saw Laurel standing in the hallway, looking anxious but determined. "Laurel," I said, opening the door in surprise. "How did you know where I live?" "HR files," she admitted, stepping inside when I gestured for her to enter. "I know I shouldn't have, but after everything that happened yesterday, I had to talk to you directly." I led her to my kitchen, offering coffee which she gratefully accepted. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept much. "The office is imploding," she said without preamble, cupping the mug between her hands. After Jordan was escorted out, Camilla tried to take control of the sales team, but no one would listen to her. Kent basically told her to her face that she had no authority. Half the executive team didn't show up this morning. Rumor is they're meeting with headhunters. I nodded, listening carefully. This inside perspective was valuable, confirming that the power vacuum was developing exactly as Owen and I had anticipated. "What about client calls?" I asked. "That's the worst part," Laurel sighed. "The Stevensons canceled their spring collection order. That's over $400,000 gone. The Henderson Group sent a formal letter terminating their corporate account, effective immediately. Even smaller clients are calling hourly, asking specifically for you." She looked up at me. "Effie, what's really going on? Why did Jordan fire you, only to get thrown out himself 3 days later?" I studied her for a moment. Laurel had been my right hand for years, loyal and discreet. She deserved some insight, even if I couldn't reveal everything yet. Jordan was working with Morgan Brothers to sell Monarch, I explained. My client relationships and position with the board would have complicated their acquisition plan, so they removed me first. They didn't anticipate how quickly clients would react, or that Owen would return from medical leave and discover what was happening. Laurel's eyes widened. So the rumors about a takeover are true. Were true, I corrected. The situation is evolving. And what about you? She pressed. Are you coming back? Everyone's asking, but no one seems to know anything concrete. I smiled slightly. That's by design. For now, let's just say that my separation from Monarch was shorter than Jordan intended. Laurel studied my expression, then her own face brightened with realization. You're already back, aren't you? Behind the scenes? Let's just say I've been in discussions with Owen about Monarch's future leadership. She sat back, processing this information. That explains why Michael Barrett locked your office yesterday and had IT reset all the security protocols. They're preparing for your return. She paused, then asked more hesitantly, At what level? The question was direct, but I appreciated her perception. That will be announced officially later today. Laurel nodded slowly, connecting the dots. It must be significant if it's being handled this carefully. She took another sip of coffee, then added, You should know something else. After Jordan left, Camilla tried to access your client files, the detailed notes and personal information you kept on each relationship. It blocked her, saying they needed executive authorization. This was new information. How did she respond? She was furious. Said she had Jordan's authorization as the new sales director. But the IT manager, you know Damon, the one you helped when his mother was ill last year? He told her that Jordan's authorizations had been suspended, and she'd need approval from Owen or Michael Barrett. I made a mental note to thank Damon for his loyalty. Those client files contained years of personal details, children's names, spouses' preferences, anniversary dates, personal stories shared over private viewings. They were the backbone of my client relationships, far more valuable than any CRM data. What happened next? I asked. She called someone. I'm pretty sure it was someone at Morgan Brothers based on the conversation I overheard. Said there was unexpected resistance, and that the timeline might need adjustment. I nodded. Morgan Brothers was realizing their smooth acquisition was becoming increasingly complicated. There's one more thing, Laurel continued, her voice dropping slightly. Jordan has been calling board members. I know because he tried to have me set up a conference call from my desk phone yesterday after his access was revoked. When I refused, he didn't take it well. What did he say? I asked, keeping my tone neutral despite the surge of protectiveness I felt toward Laurel. That I was throwing away my career by choosing the losing side. That once Morgan Brothers took over, everyone associated with you would be cleared out. He said some other things too, about you specifically, that I won't repeat. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand briefly. Thank you for standing your ground. And for coming here this morning. This insight is incredibly valuable. She smiled, looking relieved. So what happens now? Now, I said, glancing. At my watch, I need to prepare for a meeting that will determine Monarch's future, and you need to return to the office as if nothing unusual has happened. You want me to be your eyes and ears, she deduced. For just a few more hours, I confirmed. By this afternoon, everything will be different. As Laurel prepared to leave, she paused at the door. Everyone misses you, she said simply. The place doesn't work without you. Whatever's happening with Morgan Brothers, with Jordan, with Owen, the team is with you. You should know that. After she left, I sat with her words, feeling an unexpected emotion welling up. Beyond the strategic maneuvering, beyond the corporate chess match with Morgan Brothers, there was something profoundly validating about knowing the team's loyalty remained with me. Not because of my title or authority, but because of the culture and relationships we'd built together over years. I finished my coffee, reflecting on everything Laurel had shared. Jordan was growing desperate. Camilla was discovering her position was more tenuous than promised, and Morgan Brothers was realizing their straightforward acquisition had become considerably more complex. Perfect. Everything was unfolding exactly as I had hoped. My phone rang. Michael Barrett calling with an update. The board meeting last night went exactly as we anticipated, he reported. Once Owen revealed Jordan's unauthorized negotiations with Morgan Brothers, the board voted unanimously to support his suspension. Even the 3 members Morgan had approached back to Owen once they understood the full situation. And the CEO announcement? I asked. On the agenda for 2 p.m. today. The paperwork is prepared, the compensation committee has approved your terms, and Owen has personally spoken with each board member to secure their support. It's happening, Effie. I thanked him and ended the call, then walked to my closet to select my outfit for the day. Not just any outfit, the one I would wear for my first official appearance as CEO of Monarch Luxury Group. I selected a precisely tailored black suit I'd purchased in Milan 2 years ago, but had never worn. I'd been saving it for a truly significant occasion, paired with a simple cream silk blouse and the vintage Cartier watch that had been my first introduction to the world of luxury timepieces. It conveyed exactly the image I wanted. Confident, sophisticated, uncompromising. As I dressed, my phone buzzed with a text from Owen. Car will pick you up at 1:30. Everything is ready. In 3 hours, I would officially become CEO of the company that had fired me just 4 days ago. The irony wasn't lost on me, but this wasn't about irony or even vindication. It was about finally claiming the position I had earned through years of dedication and results, the position Jordan had tried to ensure I would never hold. Sometimes the most powerful moves in business come not from aggression, but from patience. From allowing your opponents to underestimate you until the moment it's too late for them to correct their mistake. Jordan Wallace had made that mistake when he fired me, believing I would simply disappear. Today, he would learn just how catastrophic that miscalculation had been. As the appointed time approached, I reviewed the notes I'd prepared for my first official acts as CEO. These weren't just administrative decisions, but strategic moves that would define my leadership from day one. Each had been carefully calculated to stabilize Monarch, reassure key stakeholders, and decisively end Morgan Brothers' acquisition attempt. At precisely 1:30 p.m., my doorman called to announce that a car was waiting. When I stepped outside, I was surprised to find Owen himself in the back seat of the Monarch executive car, a rare gesture that signaled the importance of today's transition. Effie, he greeted me warmly as I slid into the leather seat beside him. Ready for this? More than ready, I replied with quiet confidence. As the car pulled into traffic, Owen handed me a leather portfolio embossed with Monarch's crown logo. The latest financial reports, client statements, and market analyses you requested. And this, he added, extracting a sealed envelope. Just arrived from Morgan Brothers. I raised an eyebrow. They're persistent. Aggressively so, Owen agreed. This is their formal acquisition offer, delivered to the board this morning. $245 million, contingent on immediate acceptance and an expedited due diligence process. I whistled softly. The number was substantially higher than Monarch's last valuation, a testament to how badly Morgan Brothers wanted the company. They're trying to preempt our countermoves, I observed, opening the envelope to review the terms. Interesting timing. They sensed the momentum shifting, Owen said. Victor Morgan called me personally this morning, said they were prepared to respect my legacy while modernizing operations for the digital era. Standard acquisition language, I noted. Respectful platitudes followed by systematic dismantling. Owen nodded grimly. They also mentioned having a substantial offer extended to you to join their executive team post-acquisition. Victor seemed quite confident you'd accept once you saw their terms. I smiled slightly. He called yesterday with essentially the same pitch. Seems to believe everyone has a price. Don't they? Owen asked, studying me with genuine curiosity. Not a price that can be measured in dollars or titles, I replied. Some things matter more. The rest of the ride passed in comfortable silence as I reviewed the financial materials. Despite the client exodus triggered by my firing, Monarch's fundamentals remained strong. The growth strategies I'd implemented over the past 3 years had built resilience into the business model, diversifying our revenue streams beyond just the ultra-high net worth individuals Jordan had wanted to focus on exclusively. When we arrived at Monarch headquarters, we entered through the executive entrance, the same door I'd used yesterday, but under very different circumstances. This time, there was no secrecy. Michael Barrett waited inside, accompanied by Diane Mercer, the board member who had been my early champion. The board is assembled, Michael informed us. All 12 members present, either in person or via secure video conference. And the executive team? I asked. Waiting in the main conference room as requested, Diane replied. There's quite a buzz in the building. Word has spread that a major announcement is coming. I nodded. Good. Has Jordan made any further contact with board members? Michael's expression tightened. He tried. 3 separate calls this morning, all rejected. He then sent a lengthy email challenging his suspension and threatening legal action. As expected, I said calmly. Is the legal team prepared? Fully. We've documented everything, including his unauthorized negotiations with Morgan Brothers. His employment contract gives clear grounds for termination given the circumstances. Perfect. Then let's not keep everyone waiting. The 4 of us walked toward the boardroom, our footsteps echoing in the marble-floored corridor. Just before we reached the double doors, Owen touched my arm lightly. Effie, he said quietly, I want you to know something. When I started Monarch, 23 years ago, I dreamed of building something that would outlast me. Something my son would someday lead with the same passion I had. That dream died 3 days ago. His eyes held mine steadily. But today, a new dream begins. Monarch couldn't be in better hands. The sincerity in his voice caught me by surprise, touching something deeper than professional pride. This wasn't just a business transition. It was the passing of a legacy. Thank you, Owen, I said simply. I won't let you down. With that, Michael opened the boardroom doors. The scene inside was exactly as I had visualized it. 12 board members seated around the massive table, expressions ranging from curious to concerned to cautiously optimistic. At the head of the table sat an empty chair, the CEO's position, vacant since Owen's partial retirement 3 months ago, briefly occupied by Jordan and now awaiting its new occupant. Owen walked to the head of the table but remained standing beside the chair rather than taking it. Thank you all for convening on such short notice, he began. The past few days have been challenging for Monarch, but today marks a new chapter in our company's history. He briefly summarized the events we all knew, Jordan's unauthorized negotiations, with Morgan Brothers, my improper termination, the client exodus that followed, and the board's unanimous vote to suspend Jordan pending further investigation. Morgan Brothers believes Monarch is vulnerable, Owen continued. Their offer, delivered this morning, attempts to capitalize on what they perceive as instability following these events. He gestured to the documents being distributed around the table. But Monarch is not vulnerable. Monarch is not for sale. And Monarch's future is brighter than ever under the leadership of our new chief executive officer. He turned to me, extending his hand toward the empty chair in a symbolic gesture that didn't escape anyone in the room. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I present Effie Harris, effective immediately. The reaction was subtle but unmistakable, a collective shift in energy as the board absorbed this announcement. I stepped forward, accepting the chair Owen offered, and took my place at the head of the table. Thank you, Owen. And thank you all for your confidence, I began, my voice steady and clear. I recognize the unusual circumstances of this transition, but unusual times call for decisive leadership. I opened the portfolio in front of me. Before we address Morgan Brothers' offer, I want to outline my immediate priorities as CEO and the strategic direction I intend to take Monarch. For the next 30 minutes, I presented a comprehensive vision for Monarch's future. Not just damage control for the current crisis, but a bold expansion of the growth strategies I'd implemented as sales director. I detailed plans for digital, transformation, client experience enhancement, targeted market expansion, and operational efficiencies that would increase profitability without sacrificing quality or service. As I spoke, I watched the board members' expressions shift from cautious evaluation to active engagement. Even the three who had initially been approached by Morgan Brothers were leaning forward, asking thoughtful questions about implementation timelines and resource allocation. Now, regarding Morgan Brothers' offer, I continued, turning to the final page in my presentation. I recommend we respond with a simple, unambiguous statement. Monarch Luxury Group is not for sale at any price. We are committed to remaining independent and continuing our legacy of excellence. Bernard Franklin, our longest-serving board member, cleared his throat. While I appreciate your confidence, Ms. Harris, $245 million is a substantial offer. Our fiduciary duty requires we at least consider. With respect, Bernard, I interrupted gently. That duty also requires us to consider Monarch's long-term value, not just immediate returns. Based on the growth projections I've outlined, Monarch's valuation could reach $400 million within 3 years. Morgan Brothers isn't offering a premium. They're attempting to acquire us at a discount before we reach our full potential. The room fell silent as the board considered my words. Furthermore, I added, I've already secured commitments from our top 20 clients to not only remain with Monarch, but to increase their annual spending under my leadership. That alone represents $35 million in guaranteed revenue for the coming year. Bernard's eyebrows rose. You've secured these commitments already? I nodded. Relationships matter in luxury retail. These clients aren't loyal to a brand. They're loyal to people they trust. Morgan Brothers fundamentally misunderstands this, which is precisely why their acquisition would ultimately destroy Monarch's value, not enhance it. The strategic negotiation was working. I could see the momentum building, the board aligning, behind my vision rather than Morgan Brothers' offer. The path forward was becoming clear to everyone in the room. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. Monarch would reject Morgan Brothers' offer and proceed with the strategic direction I had outlined. My position as CEO was confirmed with full board support, and Owen was formally appointed as Chairman Emeritus, a position that acknowledged his legacy while transferring operational control fully to me. As the board meeting concluded, I stood to address them one final time. Thank you for your trust, I said. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an executive team waiting to meet their new CEO and a company to lead into its next chapter. The walk from the boardroom to the executive conference room where the management team waited felt symbolic, a journey from backroom negotiations to public leadership. Michael and Owen flanked me as we moved through the corridors, while Diane had gone ahead to ensure everyone was assembled. Are you nervous? Michael asked quietly as we approached the conference room. I considered the question honestly. No, I replied. This isn't about me or my feelings. It's about what Monarch needs right now. Owen nodded approvingly. That's why you're the right person for this job. When we reached the glass doors of the conference room, I paused for a moment, taking in the scene. The entire executive team was gathered, department heads, regional directors, and senior managers. About 20 people in total. Some I had worked closely with for years. Others had been recruited during Jordan's brief tenure and were essentially strangers. Their expressions ranged from curious to anxious, all of them clearly aware that something significant was about to happen. Notably absent were Jordan, of course, and Camilla Porter. I had specifically requested that Camilla not be included in this initial meeting. Her future with Monarch would be determined later, after I had assessed her level of complicity in Jordan and Morgan Brothers' scheme. "Ready?" Owen asked. I nodded, and he opened the door. The room fell silent immediately as we entered. All eyes turned to us, or more specifically, to me. My appearance was clearly unexpected for many of them. Several exchanged startled glances or whispered comments. I walked directly to the head of the table, where the CEO traditionally sat, and remained standing. Owen took a position to my right, while Michael stood slightly behind us. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice clear and authoritative. "For those who don't know me, I'm Effie Harris. Until 4 days ago, I was Monarch's Director of Sales." I paused, letting the significance of my presence sink in. "Today, I stand before you as Monarch Luxury Group's new Chief Executive Officer, appointed by Owen Wallace and unanimously confirmed by our Board of Directors." The reaction was immediate. Raised eyebrows, widened eyes, a few audible gasps. Kent, representing the sales department in Camilla's absence, broke into a broad smile. Clive, our chief marketing officer who had always been an ally, nodded with satisfaction. Others looked stunned or confused. I recognize this announcement may come as a surprise, particularly given events of the past few days, I continued. So let me be completely transparent about what has happened and where we go from here. Over the next 15 minutes, I outlined the situation in clear, direct terms, Jordan's unauthorized negotiations with Morgan Brothers, my improper termination as part of that scheme, the resulting client exodus, and the board's decision to suspend Jordan and reject the acquisition offer. Morgan Brothers believed they could acquire Monarch at a discount by removing key personnel and creating instability, I explained. They severely underestimated two things: the loyalty of our clients and the resilience of this company. I moved around the table as I spoke, making eye contact with each executive. Some of you worked closely with me before my departure. Others know me only by reputation. But all of you need to understand this. My appointment isn't about reversing Jordan's decision to fire me. It's about securing Monarch's future as an independent, thriving luxury brand. I returned to the head of the table and finally took my seat, a deliberate signal that the formal announcement was complete and we were moving to operational matters. Now, we have work to do. In the past 4 days, we've lost significant client relationships and market confidence. My priority is to stabilize the company immediately and then return to growth. Here's how we're going to do it. I laid out a clear action plan for the next 72 hours. Client outreach protocols, communication strategies, operational adjustments, and financial measures to weather the temporary disruption. Each department had received specific directives tailored to their area of responsibility. "Questions?" I asked when I had finished. After a moment of silence, Dina from Finance raised her hand. "What about Camilla Porter? She's been operating as sales director since your departure." I nodded, appreciating the direct question. "Ms. Porter's role is under review. For now, Kent will serve as acting sales director, reporting directly to me." I turned to Kent. "I'll meet with you immediately following this meeting to coordinate client outreach." Kent nodded, clearly pleased with the assignment. Another hand went up. Harris from Operations, one of Jordan's recent hires whom I didn't know well. What message are we giving clients about Jordan Wallace? They're bound to ask. The official statement is that Jordan has been suspended pending a review of unauthorized activities, I replied evenly. We will not elaborate beyond that to clients. This is an internal matter, and we will handle it with appropriate discretion. I scanned the room, noting the mixture of reactions, most supportive or neutral, a few still processing the dramatic shift in leadership. This was to be expected. Loyalty couldn't be demanded, only earned. One final note, I said, my tone shifting slightly. I understand the past few days have been confusing and unsettling for everyone. Some of you may have concerns about the stability of your positions or the direction of the company under my leadership. Let me be clear. I judge people by their contributions, their integrity, and their commitment to Monarch's success, not by their relationship with previous leadership. I made eye contact with several of Jordan's recent hires specifically. You will all have the opportunity to demonstrate your value to Monarch moving forward. I expect loyalty to the company, not to me personally. Results and integrity, that's what matters. The tension in the room visibly eased. Even those who had been most closely aligned with Jordan seemed to relax slightly. Now, I concluded, standing once more, you all have your immediate priorities. I expect hourly updates on client retention efforts and daily reports on all other initiatives. We have a company to stabilize and a future to secure. Let's get to work. As the meeting broke up, executives immediately formed small groups, already beginning to implement the directives I'd outlined. Owen touched my arm lightly. Masterfully handled, he said quietly. It's just the beginning, I replied. The real test will be in the execution. Michael approached with a tablet displaying my schedule for the remainder of the day, a carefully orchestrated sequence of meetings, calls, and media interviews designed to announce my appointment to the world and begin rebuilding market confidence in Monarch. Your office is ready, he informed me. And Richard Daniels is holding for you on line 1. He heard about your appointment through the grapevine and wants to be the first to congratulate you. I smiled. Put him through in 5 minutes. First, I need to make one quick call. As Owen and Michael left to attend to their own responsibilities, I stepped into a quiet corner and dialed a number I hadn't used in 4 days. Victor Morgan, the familiar voice answered. Mr. Morgan, I said calmly. Effie Harris, CEO of Monarch Luxury Group. I believe you have a letter to withdraw. The silence on the other end was deeply satisfying. When Victor finally spoke, his smooth confidence had evaporated. Ms. Harris, this is unexpected. Is it? You should have done your homework more thoroughly before attempting to manipulate my termination. Monarch is not for sale. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever during my tenure as CEO. I trust that's clear enough for your board of directors. Without waiting for his response, I ended the call and walked toward what had once been Owen's office, and was now mine. My calculated return to Monarch wasn't just about reclaiming a position or exacting justice for wrongful termination. It was about protecting something valuable, something worth fighting for. A company built on relationships, expertise, and integrity, not just profit margins and acquisition targets. As I stepped into the CEO's office for the first time, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where I belonged, not because Jordan had fired me, but because I had earned it through years of dedication and results. Sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage of all. The next 48. Ours were a masterclass in crisis management and leadership transition. I operated on minimal sleep, fueled by purpose, and the knowledge that these critical early days would define my tenure as CEO. My first call as chief executive had been to Richard Daniels, our highest value client. His delight at my appointment was immediate and genuine. Finally, someone with sense is running that place, he'd declared. Owen should have done this years ago, instead of trying to force his son into a role he wasn't suited for. I appreciate your confidence, Richard, I'd replied. I understand you've been considering a significant anniversary purchase. We were, he confirmed. Nearly $2 million for Teresa's 25th anniversary. But when you left, we put those plans on hold. I'd like to personally handle your selection, I offered. In fact, I have several pieces arriving from Geneva next week that might be perfect. Pieces no other retailer in North America will have access to. By the end of the call, The Daniels $2 million purchase was back on track, with a private viewing scheduled for the following week. One call, one relationship restored, $2 million in revenue secured. This pattern repeated throughout that first day as I personally contacted our top 50 clients. By evening, we had reclaimed nearly $12 million in immediate sales that had been jeopardized by my termination, with commitments for another $20 million in annual recurring business. The second day brought new challenges. News of my appointment had broken in the luxury retail press, with headlines ranging from unprecedented executive reversal at Monarch to Harris's remarkable return from fired to CEO in 4 days. Business analysts were speculating about what the leadership change meant for Monarch's future, and competitors were watching closely for signs of instability they could exploit. I addressed these concerns head-on with a carefully orchestrated media strategy. Rather than hiding behind press releases or corporate communications, I gave 3 strategic interviews to Luxury Daily, The Wall Street Journal, and Women in Business magazine. In each, I projected calm confidence, outlined our growth vision, and subtly emphasized the strength of our client relationships without directly addressing the details of Jordan's departure. Monarch's success has always been built on exceptional client relationships and uncompromising quality, I told the Wall Street Journal. As CEO, I'm focused on strengthening those foundations while expanding our reach to emerging markets and next-generation luxury consumers. The board's unanimous support for this direction speaks for itself. By midday, Monarch's stock price, which had dipped nearly 8% following news of my termination and client departures, had rebounded completely and was trading 3% above its previous position. The market was responding positively to my leadership, a tangible vote of confidence that resonated throughout the company. The real test came on my 3rd day as CEO, when we faced our first major operational challenge. A shipment of rare timepieces from our Swiss manufacturer had been delayed at customs, pieces promised to 6 different high-value clients, including the Daniels Anniversary Selection. In the past, such logistics issues would have been handled by middle management, but I recognized this as an opportunity to demonstrate my leadership approach. I convened an immediate meeting with our logistics team, customs brokers, and client relations staff. This isn't just a shipping delay, I told them. This is a promise to 6 of our most valued clients that we're at risk of breaking. I need solutions, not explanations. For the next 2 hours, we worked through the problem together. When our usual customs broker identified a 72-hour minimum delay, I personally called the regional director of customs, a former client whose daughter's engagement ring I had helped select 3 years earlier. By the end of the day, our shipment had been expedited through inspection and was en route to our secure facility. When I shared this development with the executive team, the message was clear. Under my leadership, Monarch would be relentlessly solution-oriented, would leverage relationships at every level, and would never accept impossible as an answer when client commitments were at stake. Kent, who had stepped seamlessly into his role as acting sales director, pulled me aside after the meeting. "The team is talking," he said with a slight smile. "This is different from how things worked under Jordan, or even Owen in the later years. You're not just directing, you're doing." "Leadership isn't about having the biggest office or the most impressive title," I replied. "It's about removing obstacles so your team can excel. Sometimes that means making the calls no one else can make." By the end of that 3rd day, we had not only stabilized the immediate business disruption caused by my termination, but had begun implementing the growth strategies I'd outlined to the board. The executive team was aligned, client relationships were secure, and employees throughout the organization had a clear understanding of our direction. There was only one outstanding matter to address: Camilla Porter. She had been conspicuously absent since my appointment, calling in sick for 2 consecutive days. On the morning of day 4, I asked Laurel to schedule a meeting with her for that afternoon. She sounds nervous, Laurel reported after making the call. Asked if she should bring her employee file. I shook my head. Tell her that won't be necessary. This is a conversation, not a termination. When Camilla arrived at my office, she looked nothing like the confident woman who had been so quickly installed in my former position. Her usual polish was diminished by visible anxiety as she took the seat across from my desk. Thank you for coming in, Camilla, I began, keeping my tone professional and neutral. I wanted to discuss your role at Monarch moving forward. She straightened slightly. I understand if you want to replace me. Given the circumstances, I held up a hand to stop her. Before we discuss that, I'd like to hear directly from you. How much did you know about Jordan's arrangement with Morgan Brothers? Were you actively involved in the plan to terminate me? Or were you simply accepting a promotion when offered? The directness of my question seemed to catch her off guard. She hesitated, clearly weighing her response carefully. I knew Morgan Brothers was interested in acquiring Monarch, she finally admitted. Jordan told me they wanted fresh leadership in sales, someone not tied to the old way of doing things. He said you were resistant to change. And my termination? Did you know that was coming? She looked down briefly. I knew he planned to restructure the department. I didn't know it would happen so abruptly, or without a transition period. I studied her, assessing the sincerity in her response. She had been a pawn in Jordan's game, ambitious certainly, and willing to benefit from my removal, but perhaps not the architect of it. Camilla, I believe in giving people the opportunity to prove their value, I said after a moment. You have expertise in areas that could benefit Monarch, particularly in digital marketing and younger demographic engagement. These align with our growth strategy. Her expression shifted from resignation to cautious hope. I'm creating a new position, Director of Digital Strategy and Emerging Markets. It reports to Kent in sales for now, with dotted line responsibility to marketing. The role focuses on expanding our digital presence and developing programs specifically for first-time luxury buyers. I think your background makes you well-suited for it, if you're interested. The offer clearly surprised her. You're not firing me? I'm offering you the chance to contribute in an area where we need expertise, I clarified. Whether you take that opportunity is up to you. Camilla sat straighter, processing this unexpected development. I would be very interested. Thank you. As she left my office a few minutes later, after discussing the specifics of the new role, I reflected on the decision. Some might have expected me to fire Camilla immediately upon taking control, a symbolic purging of Jordan's influence. But true leadership isn't about retribution. It's about maximizing value and talent for the organization's benefit. By the end of my first week as CEO, Monarch was not just stable, but thriving. The client relationships I'd nurtured for years were stronger than ever. Our stock price had risen 7% above pre-crisis levels, and the organization had rallied around my leadership with a renewed sense of purpose and direction. Jordan Wallace had fired me believing he was eliminating an obstacle to his plans. Instead, he had set in motion a chain of events that revealed his own inadequacies while elevating me to the position I had earned through years of exceptional performance and results. Sometimes the greatest opportunities come disguised as setbacks. The key is recognizing them when they arrive. 2 weeks into my tenure as CEO, Monarch had regained its equilibrium. Client relationships were fully restored, operational workflows had normalized, and the executive team had adapted to my leadership style. The crisis atmosphere had dissipated, replaced by a focused energy as we implemented our growth initiatives. I was reviewing quarterly projections in my office when Laurel knocked on my door, her expression unusually tense. Jordan Wallace is in the building, she said without preamble. Security just called up. He's demanding to see you. I set down my pen. Is he alone? No. He's with 2 men in suits. his lawyer and someone from Morgan Brothers, according to the front desk? I nodded, unsurprised. Jordan's silence these past 2 weeks had been temporary, not permanent. This confrontation was inevitable. Have security escort them to the main conference room, I instructed. Not my office, and ask Michael Barrett to join us immediately. As Laurel left to make the arrangements, I took a moment to center myself. This wasn't a personal confrontation. It was a business challenge to be managed professionally. When I entered the conference room 10 minutes later, Jordan was pacing near the windows while his companions sat rigidly at the table. His appearance had changed noticeably in 2 weeks, his usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled, his expression tense. "Jordan," I acknowledged calmly, taking a seat at the head of the table. "This is unexpected." "Is it?" he replied, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You stage a corporate coup, take my position, turn my father against me, and don't expect me to respond?" Michael Barrett entered quietly behind me, legal pad in hand, and took a seat to my right. "Perhaps we should start with introductions," I suggested, ignoring Jordan's outburst and looking to his companions. The older man cleared his throat. "Robert Stillwell, legal counsel for Mr. Wallace." The younger man beside him added, "Thomas Morgan, Vice President of Acquisitions, Morgan Brothers." I raised an eyebrow at the second introduction. "Morgan, any relation to Victor?" "His son," Thomas replied stiffly. "Interesting," I noted. "A family business like Monarch was intended to be." Jordan slammed his palm on the table. "Enough pleasantries. I'm here to inform you that I'm challenging your appointment as CEO. The board vote was conducted under false pretenses with incomplete information, and while I was denied the opportunity to present my side." I met his gaze steadily. "The board was fully informed of your unauthorized negotiations with Morgan Brothers, your failure to disclose those negotiations to Owen or the board, and your improper termination of a key executive as part of that scheme." "What information do you believe was missing?" Stillwell interjected smoothly. "My client had full authority as CEO to explore strategic partnerships, including potential acquisition offers. Nothing in his employment contract or corporate bylaws prevented such exploratory discussions." "Exploratory discussions are one thing," Michael countered. "Secret negotiations with a company known for dismantling acquired brands, coupled with the termination of executives likely to oppose such a sale, crosses the line from exploration to conspiracy." Thomas Morgan leaned forward. "Morgan Brothers made a generous offer for Monarch, $245 million, well above market valuation. The board had a fiduciary duty to properly consider that offer, not dismiss it outright based on emotional attachment to the company's independent status." I smiled slightly. "The board didn't reject your offer because of emotional attachment, Mr. Morgan. They rejected it because our growth projections under current leadership indicate a valuation of approximately $400 million within 3 years. Accepting your offer would have been fiscally irresponsible," Jordan scoffed. "Growth projections based on what? Your sales strategies that barely worked during an economic boom? The luxury market is changing. Morgan Brothers recognized that, even if my father and his cronies don't. Our first quarter results, under my leadership, suggest otherwise," I replied evenly. "Revenue is up 12% compared to the same period last year. Client acquisition in the under 40 demographic has increased 23%. And our exclusive partnership with Maison Laurent, finalized yesterday, gives us distribution rights for their limited collection across North America." The mention of Maison Laurent caused a visible reaction from both Jordan and Thomas Morgan. The prestigious Swiss manufacturer was notoriously selective about their retail partners, and Monarch had been pursuing this relationship for years without success. "That's impossible," Jordan said. "I personally met with Laurent's CEO 3 months ago. They weren't interested. They weren't interested in partnering with someone planning to sell to Morgan Brothers," I corrected. Once we clarified our commitment to remaining independent and our plans for authentic brand growth rather than corporate consolidation, they were quite receptive. Thomas Morgan's expression darkened. This development clearly complicated their strategy. Regardless of recent developments, Stillwell continued, my client is prepared to pursue legal action challenging the board's decision and your appointment. We have documentation showing that Mr. Wallace was improperly denied due process during his suspension. Michael leaned forward. And we have documentation proving Mr. Wallace violated his fiduciary duties to Monarch, breached his employment contract, and attempted to orchestrate the sale of the company without proper disclosure or authorization. I suggest you consider carefully before pursuing litigation that would make all of this public record. The threat was clear. A legal battle would expose Jordan's actions to public scrutiny, potentially damaging his reputation beyond repair. Jordan, however, wasn't deterred. This isn't just about my position, he insisted, turning to me. This is about my birthright. My father built Monarch for me to lead, not for an employee to commandeer through manipulation and fear tactics. I met his gaze calmly. Monarch isn't a birthright, Jordan. It's a business, one that succeeds or fails based on leadership, strategy, and execution. Your father gave you the opportunity to prove yourself. The results speak for themselves. You turned him against me, Jordan accused, his composure slipping further. Decades of planning for succession, erased because you saw an opportunity to seize control during a moment of vulnerability. Owen made his decision based on your actions, not my influence, I replied. You tried to sell his life's work without his knowledge. You fired the person most responsible for the company's growth because she might oppose your plans. These were your choices, Jordan, not mine. Thomas Morgan, sensing the conversation was becoming unproductive, attempted to redirect. Perhaps there's a compromise position here. Morgan Brothers remains interested in acquiring Monarch, but we're open to restructuring our offer to include retention packages for key executives, including you, Ms. Harris. I shook my head. Monarch is not for sale. Not at $245 million, not at $300 million, not at any price during my tenure as CEO. The board has been unequivocal on this point. Everyone has a price, Thomas insisted. That's where you're fundamentally wrong, I replied. Some things aren't measured in dollars. Legacy, integrity, independence. These have value beyond what appears on a balance sheet. Jordan laughed bitterly. Such noble sentiments from someone who just happened to end up with my job. I turned to him, my expression softening slightly. Jordan, I never wanted your job. I wanted to continue building what I'd started at Monarch. You forced this situation when you fired me without cause, mistakenly believing I was just another disposable executive. The board didn't choose me over you because of manipulation. They chose me because I've consistently delivered results, while you've consistently prioritized your own interests over the company's. The room fell silent as my words hung in the air. For a brief moment, something like realization flickered across Jordan's face. Perhaps the first recognition that his actions, not mine, had led to this outcome. This conversation is over, he finally said, standing abruptly. You'll be hearing from our attorneys. As the three men prepared to leave, I remained seated, projecting calm confidence. Before you pursue legal action, I suggest you review Monarch's performance data from the past 2 weeks compared to the 3 months under Jordan's leadership. The numbers tell a compelling story about who should be leading this company. After they departed, Michael turned to me with a raised eyebrow. That went about as expected. Indeed, I agreed. They needed to make the threat directly to see if we would flinch. And now? Now they'll reconsider once they review the actual data. Jordan may still pursue legal action out of pride, but Morgan Brothers won't back a losing strategy. They're business people first. They'll move on to easier targets. And that's exactly what happened. 3 days later, Thomas Morgan called to explore potential partnership opportunities instead of acquisition. a face-saving retreat from their previous position. Jordan's lawyer followed up with a much-reduced demand for a settlement rather than the threatened lawsuit. The emerging opposition had tested our resolve and found it unyielding. More importantly, they had discovered what Jordan had failed to recognize from the beginning. Monarch's value wasn't in its brand name or market position alone, but in the relationships, expertise, and vision that I and my team brought to the key company. Sometimes, the most powerful response to opposition isn't force, but unwavering confidence in your own value. Jordan had fired me believing I was replaceable. His greatest mistake was failing to recognize that some people aren't just employees, they're the heart of what makes a business successful. 1 month into my tenure as CEO, Monarch was not just recovering, but thriving. The quarterly sales projections had been revised upward twice. Our stock was performing exceptionally well, and industry publications were beginning to feature profiles about our remarkable turnaround under new leadership. Despite Jordan's retreat and Morgan Brothers' shift to seeking partnerships rather than acquisition, I remained cautious. Experience had taught me that corporate threats rarely disappear completely. They simply transform and re-emerge in different forms. "You're being paranoid," Owen commented one evening as we reviewed the monthly performance metrics in my office. "Jordan's backed down, Morgan Brothers has moved on, and the company is performing better than ever. You've won." I smiled slightly. In business, victory is never permanent. It's simply a momentary advantage that requires constant vigilance to maintain. Owen chuckled. "You sound like me 20 years ago." "I'll take that as a compliment," I replied, closing the report we'd been reviewing. "Which reminds me, I've been meaning to ask about something. When Jordan first fired me, you mentioned a clause in my contract that you had personally insisted on after the last acquisition disaster. What were you referring to?" Owen's expression grew more serious. "That was before your time. About 12 years ago, Monarch nearly merged with Lux Holdings, a conglomerate similar to Morgan Brothers, though smaller. We'd grown quickly but needed capital for expansion. Their CEO, Alexander Reed, seemed to understand our vision, promised operational independence post-merger. "I'm guessing it didn't go as planned," I prompted when he paused. "Not even close." The moment the ink dried on the preliminary agreement, Reed began systematically removing our key people, replacing them with his own team. By the time I realized what was happening, we'd lost critical client relationships and brand positioning. It took every ounce of legal leverage and financial resources I had to extract Monarch from that disaster. And that's why you created the client protection clause. "In my contract," I surmised. Owen nodded. "After rebuilding from the Lux debacle, I recognized that certain relationships were too valuable to risk in corporate power plays. When you demonstrated your exceptional ability with client development, I made sure your contract included safeguards that would prevent history from repeating itself." "Thank you for that foresight," I said sincerely. "Without that clause, Jordan's plan might have succeeded." "Jordan," Owen sighed heavily. "I still struggle to understand how my son could have made such catastrophic misjudgments. I considered my words carefully. People often mistake inheritance for qualification. Jordan grew up watching you build Monarch, but watching isn't the same as doing. He saw the prestige and authority of your position without fully appreciating the expertise and relationships that earned it." Owen nodded slowly. A harsh but accurate assessment. After he left, I remained in my office, contemplating our conversation. The parallels between the Lux Holdings situation and Morgan Brothers' attempt were striking and concerning. If Owen had nearly lost Monarch to a similar strategy 12 years ago, despite his experience and controlling interest, we needed stronger protections against future attempts. The next morning, I called Michael Barrett to my office. "I need you to build a case," I told him without preamble. "Not for current litigation, but as preventative documentation against future threats." Michael raised an eyebrow. "You're still concerned about Morgan Brothers?" "Morgan Brothers, other potential acquirers, even Jordan if he decides to try again from a different angle, I clarified. I want comprehensive documentation of the events surrounding my termination and reinstatement, the unauthorized negotiations with Morgan Brothers, and the subsequent performance improvements under my leadership. I outlined exactly what I wanted: sworn statements from key witnesses, financial records showing the client exodus after my termination and recovery after my return, emails and communications revealing Jordan's coordination with Morgan Brothers, and detailed performance comparisons between his brief leadership and mine. This seems extremely thorough for a threat that appears to have subsided, Michael observed. Consider it insurance, I replied. If Jordan or Morgan Brothers ever attempt to challenge my leadership again, I want irrefutable evidence of both their previous misconduct and my value to Monarch. Michael nodded, understanding dawning in his expression. You're building a case not just against past actions, but against potential future challenges. Precisely. In business, as in chess, the best players think several moves ahead. Over the next 2 weeks, Michael and his team quietly compiled the documentation I'd requested. Laurel assisted by organizing key communications and meeting notes from the critical period. Kent provided detailed client feedback and sales data demonstrating the direct correlation between my leadership and Monarch's revenue performance. The resulting file was comprehensive and damning, a meticulous record of Jordan's failed leadership, his coordination with Morgan Brothers to sell the company against Owen's wishes, and the concrete value I had brought to Monarch throughout my tenure. When Michael presented the completed documentation, bound in a discreet black portfolio, I didn't immediately file it away. Instead, I reviewed it thoroughly, ensuring every assertion was backed by concrete evidence, every claim supported by verifiable data. This is exceptional work, I told Michael after finishing my review. Exactly what I needed. May I ask what you plan to do with it? He inquired. Nothing, hopefully, I replied. It's not meant for use unless absolutely necessary. Think of it as a dead man switch, protection that only activates if someone attempts to repeat past mistakes. I secured the portfolio in my private safe, alongside my original employment contract with its crucial client protection clause. Together, they represented both the history of attempts to undermine my position and the safeguards against future challenges. Later that week, I received an unexpected message from Clive in marketing. A financial blog was preparing to publish an article about Jordan's ouster from Monarch, focusing on the attempted Morgan Brothers acquisition and my rapid elevation to CEO. The reporter was seeking comment before publication. This was precisely the type of situation the documentation would help address. Rather than issuing a standard no comment or vague corporate statement, I decided on a different approach. I invited the reporter to Monarch headquarters for an exclusive interview, offering unprecedented access on one condition: complete factual accuracy about the transition of leadership. The interview took place in our main showroom rather than my office, a deliberate choice to emphasize Monarch's products and future rather than corporate politics. For 90 minutes, I answered the reporter's questions with measured candor, neither concealing Jordan's actions nor overemphasizing my own role. The situation was unfortunate, but ultimately straightforward, I explained. Leadership decisions must be based on performance and results, not family connections. When presented with clear evidence that Monarch was being positioned for sale without proper authorization, the board took appropriate action to protect the company's independence and future growth. When asked about my relationship with Owen and his decision to appoint me as CEO, I was equally measured. Owen Wallace built Monarch through vision and determination. When faced with challenges to that legacy, he made the difficult but necessary decision to prioritize the company's well-being over family sentiment. That requires exceptional courage. The resulting article, published a week later, was remarkably balanced. While it outlined the facts of Jordan's removal and my appointment, It focused primarily on Monarch's subsequent performance improvements and strategic direction under my leadership. Jordan was mentioned but not vilified. The Morgan Brothers acquisition attempt was described as unsuccessful, rather than blocked. Most importantly, the article established a public record of events that aligned with our documented evidence, a narrative that would be difficult for Jordan or Morgan Brothers to challenge later without contradicting already published accounts. Building. This case wasn't about retaliation or dwelling on past conflicts. It was about protecting Monarch's future by ensuring that those who had once threatened its independence couldn't easily do so again. The strongest defense isn't always found in confrontation, but in careful preparation and strategic foresight. After all, as I had learned from my own experience, sometimes the most significant threats come not from obvious enemies, but from those who underestimate your value until it's too late for them to reclaim what they've lost. 6 months into my role as CEO, Monarch was preparing for our semi-annual board meeting, my first formal presentation of complete quarterly results since taking the position. The numbers were exceptional. Sales up 28% year-over-year, client retention at an all-time high of 97%, and 3 new showrooms opened in strategic markets. The evening before the board meeting, I received an unexpected call from Owen. Jordan reached out to me, he said without preamble. He wants to attend tomorrow's board meeting. I paused, considering the implications. He's still a shareholder. Technically, he has the right. Yes, but after everything that's happened, I wanted to discuss it with you first. The fact that Owen was consulting me about his own son spoke volumes about how our relationship had evolved. What do you think he wants? I asked. Owen sighed. He claims he just wants to see the quarterly results firsthand. But knowing Jordan, there's more to it. I considered our options carefully. Blocking Jordan from the meeting might create unnecessary drama and give him grounds to claim he was being unfairly excluded from company information. Allowing him to attend would be uncomfortable, but might actually strengthen our position if the results were as strong as we knew them to be. Let him come, I decided. The numbers speak for themselves. This could be the moment of truth he needs. The following morning, the boardroom was prepared for our presentation. Financial reports were distributed, projections displayed on screens, and coffee served as board members arrived one by one. Jordan entered last, dressed immaculately in a suit that suggested he was there on business, not just as an observer. He nodded stiffly to his father, but avoided eye contact with me as he took a seat at the far end of the table. As CEO, it was my responsibility to lead the presentation. For 90 minutes, I walked the board through our performance metrics, strategic initiatives, and growth projections. The data was unambiguous. Monarch was performing at unprecedented levels under my leadership, with every key indicator showing significant improvement since Jordan's departure. Throughout the presentation, I maintained a strictly professional tone, focusing on results rather than personalities. I never mentioned Jordan by name or compared my leadership to his directly. I didn't need to. The contrast was evident in every graph and spreadsheet. When I opened the floor for questions, most board members focused on forward-looking inquiries about expansion plans and revenue projections. Then Jordan raised his hand, the eye. Room fell silent as I acknowledged him with a simple, "Yes, Jordan?" "These results are impressive," he admitted, his voice carefully controlled. "But I'm curious. What do you attribute this performance to specifically? What changed?" It was the moment of truth, a direct invitation to either criticize his leadership or claim personal credit for Monarch's success. Either response would be understandable given our history, but neither would serve the company's best interests. "Consistency," I replied simply. Monarch has always had the foundation for excellence, exceptional products, talented people, and valuable client relationships. Our recent performance comes from ensuring those elements work in harmony with a clear strategic vision and accountable leadership. Jordan held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded once, not in agreement, necessarily, but in acknowledgement. For the first time since his failed attempt to fire me, I saw something like recognition in his eyes. Not warmth or reconciliation, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Sometimes the most powerful moment of truth isn't a dramatic confrontation, but the quiet acknowledgement of undeniable reality. In the months following the board meeting, Monarch continued its upward trajectory. Our successful expansion into emerging markets had caught the attention of luxury industry analysts, and my leadership was being cited in business publications as a case study in corporate turnarounds. The conflict with Jordan and Morgan Brothers had receded into company history, not forgotten, but no longer consuming energy or attention. We were focused on the future, not the past. Then, almost exactly 1 year after Jordan had fired me, something unexpected happened. An email arrived from him, requesting a private meeting. No lawyers, no Morgan Brothers representatives, just the two of us. I deliberated briefly before agreeing. Whatever Jordan wanted to discuss, I was secure enough in my position now to hear him out. We met at a neutral location, a private dining room at the Meridian, an upscale restaurant equidistant from Monarch's headquarters and Jordan's new office. He had recently launched a small investment firm focused on tech startups, his first independent venture since leaving Monarch. When I arrived, Jordan was already seated, looking noticeably different from our last encounter. The brittle anger had faded from his expression, replaced by something more subdued and reflective. "Thank you for meeting me," he began after we'd ordered coffee. "I know you have every reason to refuse." "I'm curious about what you wanted to discuss," I replied simply. He nodded, collecting his thoughts before continuing. "A year ago, I made the worst decision of my professional life when I fired you. I was wrong, not just strategically, but ethically." The directness of his statement caught me by surprise. This wasn't what I had expected. "I convinced myself I was acting in Monarch's best interests," he continued. "That Morgan Brothers' offer represented the optimal path forward, that your opposition was about protecting your position rather than the company. I was wrong on every count." "Why tell me this now?" I asked. "Because acknowledging mistakes publicly is part of learning from them," he replied. "My father taught me that, though I didn't appreciate the lesson until recently." He placed a formal letter on the table between us. "This is my resignation from Monarch's shareholder position. I'm selling my shares, not to Morgan Brothers or any competitor, but back to the company at fair market value. I've already discussed the arrangement with my father and the board's finance committee." I studied him carefully. "You could hold those shares indefinitely. They're valuable and becoming more so. They're also a constant reminder of my failure," he said candidly. "And more practically, I need the capital for my new venture. A clean break is best for everyone." The Jordan sitting across from me was markedly different from the entitled, defensive man who had threatened legal action a year earlier. This wasn't about reconciliation, too much had happened for that, but it was about recognition, and in its way, justice. "I appreciate your directness," I said finally, "and I wish you success with your new company. There's one more thing," he added as we prepared to leave. "The Daniels account. Their anniversary purchase last year became our largest single sale in company history." I nodded, remembering the $2.1 million customized timepiece Richard had ultimately selected for Teresa. "That was always your relationship, not Monarch's," Jordan acknowledged. "I never understood the difference until I watched clients follow you despite the Monarch name remaining behind. That was educational. Sometimes justice isn't found in punishment or retribution, but in the simple acknowledgement of truth." Jordan had fired me believing I was replaceable. The consequences of that miscalculation had transformed both our lives, elevating me to CEO while forcing him to rebuild his career from scratch. As we parted ways, there was no animosity, No lingering resentment. Just the quiet recognition that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences become the justice that was needed all along. 2 years to the day after Jordan fired me, I stood in Monarch's newest flagship location, a stunning 3-story showcase in the heart of San Francisco. The expansion represented everything we had accomplished since that pivotal moment when a simple termination set in motion events that transformed both Monarch and my own life. As I watched clients and industry representatives mingle during our grand opening, Laurel appeared at my side, tablet in hand as always. "Final numbers from Q4, she said, displaying the quarterly results we would be announcing the following week. "Another record-breaking period. The board is going to be very happy." I smiled, scanning the impressive figures. Under my leadership, Monarch had nearly tripled in value, expanded to 12 locations globally, and established itself as the premier luxury timepiece retailer in North America. The $245 million that Morgan Brothers had offered now seemed almost laughably inadequate compared to our current valuation. "Have you seen the Wall Street Journal profile?" Laurel asked, switching screens to show me the business section. "They're calling you luxury retail's turnaround specialist." The photo turned out well. I skimmed the article, noting how it highlighted our growth metrics and strategic innovations without dwelling on the dramatic circumstances of my appointment. The past was becoming exactly what it should be: context rather than focus. "Owen's looking for you," Laurel added. "I think he wants to make the toast soon." I nodded, scanning the room for our chairman emeritus. At 70, Owen had fully embraced his reduced role, focusing on mentorship and industry relationships while I handled day-to-day operations. Our partnership had evolved into something neither of us could have anticipated, but that served Monarch perfectly. I found him near the central display case, deep in conversation with Richard and Teresa Daniels, still our most valuable clients and now personal friends. "Ah, Effie," Owen called as I approached. "Perfect timing." Richard was just saying this location might convince him to split his purchases between New York and San Francisco. "Only if Effie personally handles the selections," Richard clarified with a warm smile. "Some things shouldn't change, even with expansion." "Some things won't," I assured him, "no matter how much we grow." As Owen prepared to make his official toast to celebrate the new location, I took a moment to reflect on the journey. 2 years ago, I had been stunned and humiliated, standing in a Manhattan showroom as Jordan dismissed me without a second thought. Today, I led a thriving global company, had implemented the vision I always knew was possible, and had proven definitively that my value had never been tied to a title or position. The true evolution hadn't been in Monarch's impressive metrics or market position, but in my own understanding of my worth. I no longer needed external validation. I had built something that spoke for itself. Owen raised his glass, drawing everyone's attention. To new beginnings, continued excellence, and the leadership that made both possible. As glasses clinked and conversations resumed, Kent approached with a knowing smile. "Hard to believe it all started with you getting fired," he said quietly. I returned his smile. "Sometimes the end is just the beginning in disguise." That was the greatest lesson of this entire experience. Careers, like lives, aren't defined by single moments of setback or triumph, but by how we respond to them. Jordan firing me wasn't the end of my story. It was merely the catalyst for a new chapter that proved to be more successful than either of us could have imagined. Sometimes, when someone underestimates your value, they give you the perfect opportunity to demonstrate just how wrong they were, and there's no sweeter success than that. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.